Our next witness is the director of the National Security Archive at George Washington University, Professor Thomas Blanton. In the year 2000, the archive won the George Polk Award for, quote, piercing self-serving veils of government secrecy, guiding journalists in search of the truth and informing us all. He's also the founding editorial board member of freedominfo.org, a network of international freedom of information advocates. I read your prepared statement with great enthusiasm, and we're happy to have you here today.
Mr. Chairman, it's a great honor for me and Judge Gomert, and also to be in the middle of this extraordinary high-level tutorial in the Espionage Act and the Constitution. I feel like a grad student again, and it's a joy, actually. I also wanted to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for resurrecting my graveyard quote, that we have low fences around vast prairies of government secrets where we really need tall fences around small graveyards of the real secrets. And that's a core point I want to come back to today. I really have 3 points. One of them is the government always overreacts to leaks, always. And all you have to do is say the phrase Watergate plumbers, and you know what I'm talking about. Back then, they were discussing firebombing the Brookings Institution on the chance there might still be a copy of the Pentagon Papers in there. Today, you're having debates on Fox News. Let's do some targeted assassination attempts on Julian Assange. Well, I got to say, G. Gordon Liddy would be right at home. And both is absurd. And the overreaction the government typically does is not to kill anybody or firebomb something, but to go right to the second major point I want to make today. They're going to classify more information. What I'm worried about most is the backlash. I mean, in my prepared statement, I've got multiple examples of all the estimates, and they range from 50% to 90% of what the problem of overclassification really amounts to. Governor Tom Kaine, head of the 9/11 Commission, after looking at all the al-Qaeda intelligence that we gathered before 9/11, said, you know, 75% of what I saw that was classified should not have been. And the commission said we not only needed to do information sharing between the agencies, we had to do information sharing with the American people, because that's the only way we could really protect ourselves. What a great lesson that is. And the system is so overwhelmed with the secrets that we can no longer really protect the real ones, and we can't let out the ones that would actually keep us all safer. And I think it's a mistake to try to see this as a balancing test. It's not a balance between openness and security. The findings of the 9/11 Commission were that more openness would have made us more secure. That's what you do in an open society to keep yourself safe. You're not safer in the dark. You don't hide your vulnerabilities. You expose them and you fix them. That's how we proceed in America. The third point I just want to make about where we are today, we're in the middle of a syndrome that one senior government official I really respect, holds all the clearances, does the audits, pushes back against excessive secrecy, called it Wikimania. We're in the middle of Wikimania. And it's going to lead to so much more heat than light. Targeted assassination is only the most extreme case, but look at all the other proposals we've got on the table on the front burners to try to push back, to punish Wikileaks, to push back against speech. I think the problem here is we've got to look at each one of those proposals and say, is that really going to address the problem? Is it going to reduce government secrecy, or is it going to add to it? Is it going to make us more safe? Is it going to make us more free? And do that test. The Wikimania is really coming from a series of what in my statement I call wiki myths. There has not been a documents dump. Everybody uses that phrase. There hasn't been one. The less than 2,000 cables are on the public record today out of that big database. And the editors of Le Monde and The Guardian and New York Times say that WikiLeaks is consulting with them about what to publish, what to redact, and doing the dialogue with government officials in a pretty extraordinary, responsible way. It's a very different posture, I should say, than WikiLeaks had even 6 or 8 months ago. I think the criticism they've gotten from journalists like us and from the public about endangering people's lives in Afghanistan and elsewhere, believe it or not, I think they've actually heard it. There's no epidemic of leaks. In fact, all 4 of the big WikiLeaks publicity spats have come from a single person, as far as we know, Bradley Manning, young private. So how do you solve the Bradley Manning problem? Well, you could do a pretty simple thing. The Defense Department has already done it. And here's a rational security policy. Just like you got 2 people to launch nuclear missiles, you got 2 people to handle a communications manual that has codes in it, have 2 people before you can download something from a secure network. Pretty simple. That would have stopped Bradley Manning, right? Mormons send out 2 people as missionaries because that's how you have accountability, right? You don't have solos. All right. There's no diplomatic meltdown from the Wikileaks. I mean, there is a lot of heated rhetoric, but Secretary of Defense Robert Gates, who ought to know, he served every president in my lifetime, as far as I can tell. And Mr. Chairman, you quoted his remarks. Yeah, it's awkward. Yeah, it's embarrassing. But no, it's not a meltdown. It's going to make a job harder for diplomats. Maybe somebody's going to have to be reassigned. But, you know, in the long run, it's probably in the American national security interest for more foreign governments to be more accountable to their own citizens for their diplomacy. It's probably in our national security interest for the King of Saudi Arabia to actually be on the public record a little more often, and for Chinese Politburo members to get exposed every now and then. That might be a long-term goal of what American national security diplomacy ought to be about. And finally, there's not a set of wiki terrorists. I've heard that phrase batted around. They're not terrorists. I got to tell you, I wish every terrorist group in the world would write the U.S. ambassador in their local town, you know, days or a week before they're about to launch something, and ask the ambassador, hey, would you help us, you know, make sure nobody innocent gets hurt? Would you really work with us? We'd be glad to talk to you. Now, I understand why the ambassador didn't believe him, because WikiLeaks said, oh, and by the way, we'll keep anything you say to us confidential. It's kind of hard to square with the previous statements of WikiLeaks, but I wish every terrorist group would get into partnerships with Le Monde and El País and The Guardian and the New York Times to assess what the damage might be, to redact their own documents, to put regulators on the bombs they drop. That would be a good thing. WikiLeaks is not terrorists. And so that brings me my final real point and recommendation to this committee and to the prosecutors across the river in Alexandria, which is restraint. I know you don't usually have witnesses come up here and say, hey, let's all go take a nap. But, you know, in sleep-deprived Washington, we could use a little more restraint. I would say leave the Espionage Act back in mothballs, where it is right now and should stay. And in fact, what we know from some Freedom of Information requests, there's still some classified documents from 1917 that will give the Espionage Act very good company. Don't mess with it. Leave it alone. Our fundamental test should come out of Justice Stewart's dicta in the Pentagon Papers case and some wonderful articles that Jack Goldsmith has actually written in the last couple of years, where he says, look, our problem is, you know, the fundamental cause of leaks is a sense of illegitimacy that's bred by excessive government secrecy. And how do you address that? You reduce the secrecy. How do you deal with the legitimacy problem? You make sure as few secrets as possible are actually held, and you protect those very strongly. So the test is, for all these proposals, legislative and otherwise, does it send a signal that will actually reduce government secrecy? Does it send a signal that we need maximum possible disclosure, in Stewart's phrase, to have a system that actually has credibility and can protect the real secrets and where we can protect ourselves? So I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity to engage in this debate. I hope we'll reduce the mania a little bit and cut through some of the myths. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.